super, we're live. And this is one conversation that I was really looking forward to personally as well, because I am somebody who has learned how to read and write 8 different languages. And whenever I travel in different states across India, I'm like, oh wow, this is a great way that this brand has put up about their messaging and what they are going after. We have Harmind Singh Arora, who is the Director of Design and Creative at PhonePe. And along with him, we have Gaurav Mathur, who is the Vice President of Design at Flipkart. Bhavya Mani, who is a product manager at Pepper Content, is going to be moderating this conversation today for us. And towards the end, we'll also take like a quick Q&A. So if you all have questions, please put it in the Q&A tab, and we'll take it towards the end. We'll use the next 15-20 minutes for having this conversation with Gaurav and Harman, and then we'll do like a quick Q&A. Bhavya, over to you. I'm also personally looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much, Gaurav and Harman, for being here today.
Thanks, Pawan.
Thanks, Pawan.
Thank you, Pawan. A very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for investing your time with us, Gaurav and Harman, on this very warm Saturday afternoon. Firstly, we are grateful and honored to have experts of your caliber and experience with us to talk about this very trending topic, next billion users. So, when we say next billion users, what is it that comes to your mind, and who do you think are part of it? And what are the issues facing these next billion users today?
Sure. I'll take a stab at it, Bhavya. So, see, today the number of people that access internet from India actively are about anywhere between 650 to 700 million, right? And this number is likely to grow to about 900 million by 2025. So, a large number of people are coming onto the internet and accessing internet primarily from their phones for the first time, and this population in India is growing pretty rapidly. And this growth is primarily coming from the rural parts of India, tier 3, tier 4 towns and cities. And similarly, just like in India, we are seeing this growth, a lot of other developing nations are seeing similar kinds of growth. So, whether these are developing nations in Asia, Africa, or Latin America, a lot of users are accessing internet for the first time through their smartphones. And a smartphone is actually the only device, only internet connected device that they own. Um, so that's essentially the next billion users that we generally call them as. And their challenges are quite different from like this cohort, this set of people who are attending this call today. We are all mostly sitting in front of our laptops, connected to a really good network or Wi-Fi. We are in a lot of like metros, tier one cities, with really good infrastructure and access to the internet. So this base is quite different. Their challenges are quite different, and that's what we generally call or refer to as the next billion users.
Harman, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so from a perspective of India, because we are already a population of more than a billion, I think next billion users are actually in the context people who are actually going to use more open ecosystems, right? We have seen the UPI from past just few years, how it has taken shape and form, right? It has reached all 19,000 pin codes very rapidly, where people use to access, financial services, whether through, post offices or, banks, which were very, very far away from villages. But now they can just, with a couple of taps, they can just transfer payments to each other, right? And that's a power when, technology and open ecosystems come together. Technology got cheaper, 4G came up. We call it a geo effect in India, which actually got smart, and hardware became cheaper. Uh, People could afford it. Basically, overall ecosystem was adding value. Now, with a lot of regulatory bodies who are really empowering, and without that, nothing can be, done. We have ONDC coming up, right? Where the commerce is going to get democratized amongst tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 cities. Uh, And there's a very nice saying nowadays, in the user base, which we and the design community are talking about, that with smartphones, people are becoming smarter, right? Uh, as we move ahead with the advancement of technology, when the 4G happened, people did not have 4G enabled phones. But right now we don't have 5G, but people are already buying 5G enabled phones. It's been from a couple of years now. By the time 5G will come, the adoption will be too fast, very, very fast, right? And the open ecosystems like ONDC or UPI or other things which are on the way will definitely bring more users on the board, and the digitization will happen in all sectors we can imagine. And yeah.
I think that's great insight, right? We spoke about users who are accessing internet for the very first time. For these users, starting with the geo effect, as you called it, or Google UPI payments that we have today, what are what are such practices or few ways that designers can be more emphatic and effective while designing products for these emerging markets? Gaurav, sir, if you would like to take a turn at it.
Sure, sure, Bhavya. So I think different people from different industries will give very different answers for this kind of a question. I'll give you like top three or four considerations that I think we should have for designing for this set of users. I think the number one point here is language, right? And literacy rates in India are not very high. Also, the familiarity with English kind of goes down as you go into deeper parts of the country. And therefore, overcoming this language barrier is very critical for products that want to address this market or want to address solutions for these kind of users. So, language, in my opinion, is the number one area to be addressed. Now, this can be done in various ways. The best solution would be to actually use very little language in the product, and if you can design a product that's very intuitive through icons, etc., then people learn their ways, right? People say that, hey, I know the red button is for disconnecting a call, green is for picking up a call, etc., and people have learned certain things. So if you can do it without language, then awesome. If not, then I think supporting regional languages becomes a big priority for these kind of products. Also, having some kind of a way of enabling users to speak or to use voice, because even typing is a lot of friction for a lot of people. Um, so I think language and addressing it through iconography, regional languages, and voice would be my number one point here. Um, the other area that I think a lot of designers must think through very deeply is how do we build trust with these people, and how do we handhold them into doing certain activities. So can we show them how to do it? Can we provide more information to them so that they build a trust towards the platform? Because there is a lot of uh, you can call it like concerns that people have, right? About technology in general and about various products, right? Like if you ask for someone's phone number, people get very concerned. What's going to happen next, and explaining why you need certain information from them builds that kind of confidence and trust. So I think that's another area to be like uh, really looked at, and designers need to, while creating screens, because that's what designers do, and solving like complex workflows, etc., they need to have these things at the back of their mind. The other point I think is a lot of people don't have like high-end devices, right? Like devices with large screens. So there are these small screen devices with very little storage, and you need to have apps that can actually be installed on these phones and run nicely on these phones. Also, like patchy internet connectivity. So all of these also need to be like really well considered by designers. And the last point is, I think there are very different kinds of aesthetic sensibilities also uh, around these users. And that's another very challenging area for designers to really think about. Like, how do we design product, especially if it's being used by very different sets of people. If also like some metro users are going to use it, and the next a billion users, or a part of that at least, is going to use that, then how do we design the aesthetics of the product that kind of addresses both these ends of the spectrum, I would say.
I think, Harman, for you, the question would be, what are few strategies and best practices that you would use for this no internet or an offline design scenario?
Uh, First of all, I think these are the users actually where you need to really who have whether they're low bandwidths, whether they are still using the feature phones, or whether they're using they are in low network areas or whatever, right? Or they are on the go, because mobility is about on the go. Uh, the first foremost thing is accessibility, that how we are thinking accessibility. Once again, accessibility used to be other way, whether in design used to be, whether we were solving for color blindness, whether we were solving for, you know, which are very design technical things, right? But now the accessibility is very different. For that, designers and they're very unique problems, by the way. If you have a product with food delivery, or if you have a product with ride sharing, accessibility for both of them is going to be very, very different. Will be very, very different. So what the designers can do to find out what their accessibility quotient is very important, that they need to start talking to users, right? From past many, many years, if I look back my journey, early years, we used to spend more time in talking to users, but now the shift has happened that we are spending more time with design community, right? We are going to more design conferences than, right, rather than spending more time with our user base, right? uh, I think the balance needs to be there, because we learn from this. We kind of really uplift our knowledge from the design community. We learn from each other a lot. But in the midst of all this, what I'm understanding is that we are forgetting that, we learn from our users, and that's where really the design solutions are, right? The more we talk to them, more you find the accessibility problems, and more you will be at the best of yourself, that you're able to solve it. It's very difficult to pinpoint two or three things, whether it's low network area and why that low network area happens. There can be thousands of use cases of because of those low network or people using feature phones, right? uh, so yeah, so I think it's best that go to the users and then understand the accessibility issues.
That's really insightful. Opening this question to both of you now. We spoke about talking to users. So for next billion users, would you think of any different strategies or methods via which you would conduct these UX surveys? And how would you go about prototyping differently for next billion users versus users that you would do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, Bhavya. Like Herman said, like very nicely, right? Like it's important to actually go and meet users in their environment. So I don't think surveys really work for next 200 million users. I think what designers and researchers need to do is actually go and meet with people in their context, right? So go to the villages, go to tier three, tier four places, and actually see what's happening, and see the challenges that people have. Look at like the patchy internet scenarios. See how people communicate, how they refer to things, right? What do they call an icon on the screen? Like we may call something as a notification, right? What do people understand by that icon, and what do they call that? And a lot of these interviews also need to be done in regional languages, in the local language in that area. Um, I don't think we'll get much if the designer or the researcher speaks in English, and the other person is not will even to comprehend what's the question about. Yeah, it's all about like the term contextual inquiry really, and going and meeting people where they are, seeing their challenges, and bringing those insights back to the design team so that then they can work on it. Also, it's important to test a lot of designs with users. So we may make certain assumptions while designing, and we may design certain workflows or certain screens or certain way of design content, and it says certain things, right? But people may understand it very differently. So testing these workflows and screens with the actual users, doing some fair bit of usability studies will also help.
uh, just to add to Gaurav, right? So, I'll divide this question answer into two parts. One, if you are working for some company, or if you are a freelancer, or you're on your own, right, you're a consultant. So, if you are working for some company, you have a gold mine always sitting in front of you, the data from the CX side of things, right? You can always call your users, and that's the best way to recruit, by the way, to users, so that you can go to the space, you can go to the environments. To an extent, if you take the permission, you can even open up their refrigerators or their help, or ask them if they can show their wardrobes to you. You can understand what are the choices they are making, what kind of brands they're using. You can literally build a lot of patterns out of that, right? And that's even the smaller sample set, like 50 people, right? You can really build, really have good life insights, right? And that's the best way to mine insights, by the way. If you have a life insight in front of you, and if you have a value proposition of a particular product you want to build in front of you, which is usually coming from the business needs, I think if these two things combine, you are at a very good beginning to build a very powerful product, which probably users will relate to themselves. uh, so I think that's the best way to recruit if you are working with a company. If you are a freelancer or a consultant, or you are working with a services firm where you're working with multiple clients, etc., is you always can take help of research companies. They are really good ones in India, and a lot of them are now startups. You need not to really go to a bigger ones. Uh, they can help you build really good recruitment strategy for yourself. uh, where you can have a translators to have a vernacular language with you, along with you. You can build really good strat and have do dry runs before going in. uh, and I think that's the best way to solve. One example I can give you from my last field survey a couple of years, which I was doing for one food delivery brand, came to know that people in India don't understand illustrations. They understand they are cartoons, because they have been not aesthetically evolved either from the schools or etc. At last time, a lot of people who actually only been to schools, and they have seen those illustrations only in the NCERT books, right? So it was a really eye opening that when you, and most of the education to save the cost when you do animated videos is done through illustrations. Do people relate to that? The answer is actually effectively no. Bharat audience does not understand illustrations. So what do you do to make illustrations more inclusive? Uh, that's something you can solve with really great life insights and regular feedbacks from the users or validation from the users.
Very well put. Um, Now that we've spoken about why designing for next billion users is important and how we can go about it, either by means of localization, uh, what are some common mistakes that we as designers can avoid on a day to day basis while making choices for next billion users? And how can we make it a key point to be more inclusive while we are designing?
Go ahead, Herman.
Sure. I think that we are only talking about users over here, right? So I think when we talk about billion users, it's actually the billion users and vendors or merchants, or there's the other side of businesses. When you're solving for them, you are saving a lot of businesses, right? India, especially Indian economy, or whether they are underdeveloped countries like or developing nations like whether South Africa or Brazil, or which are or Indonesia. We are countries known for our khurda vepars, right? Which is unorganized sector of whole commerce, and people who are selling services or products or etc. And they literally make their living out of that. Their next generation is not very excited to join their shops or hutties or whatever, right? So the core responsibility is that how you really enable the whole ecosystem, not just for the users, but people who actually are actually you can enable them and digitize them, or they help them digitize the product and services in India, right? You need to solve for the 360 spectrum basically over here, right? So you need to build compassion for the people who are on the other end. You are basically a mere facilitator or enabler, and you need to build empathy for the users, that they get the right motivation or right intrinsic motivation to really purchase product or services. And the motivation shouldn't be the value, because if you provide the value to one end, other end suffers, right? And the intrinsic motivation has to be delight in the products, for which people need to come back for convenience, trust, and if they feel safe about really purchasing the product and services. It's the most challenging task, where we have now most evolved unicorns in the world, where companies are now at the stage where they will not able to burn as much as cash and provide value to the users, and how we now solve for the delight, so that people can, we can retain people on the platform in times to come. And that's going to be the real billion users or billion people story.
Yeah. I think the biggest mistakes or errors that designers could make while designing for the next billion users is thinking that they are the users, right? And looking at some of these well-designed apps, and taking inspiration from there without and thereby losing context of who they are actually designing for. So I think these two things, if designers keep in mind, take a fresh approach, um, go with like first principles, solve for these users, um, test continuously with the same set of users, like users from this next billion cohort. I think that will result in much better design products that work for these users.
While we're talking about empathy and building products for next billion users, what according to you are some of the North Star products that exist today that are solving for pain points of the next billion users?
There are lots of products. I think a lot of consumer internet companies that want to address a fairly large market in India and across the globe. They are addressing this very well. Obviously, companies like Google are taking a large initiative in this space. Also, when this next billion users, when someone from this cohort really starts accessing internet, starts using mobile, they generally start with consuming content, right? That's the first step. And that's not very different from how any one of us would have started at some point or the other. So they consume content, both in terms of like video content and sometimes like written content. They use it for communication, chats, etc., and news, and so on and so forth. Um, Online gaming is a fairly large space as well in this market, followed by payments, commerce, etc. So I think there are a number of companies. I won't name them, but there are a number of companies that are doing a really good work in all of these spaces. If you look at like content, media, um, communication, um, just social media for regional languages and for the next 500 million billion users, uh, payments, commerce, etc.
Harmin, a question for you here would be, in terms of the products that we looked at, North Star products, but what are certain industries that you would think are tricky or challenging in terms of building for next billion users?
Um, I think the next billion user, I think financial sector is still is very new. The whole BFSI, especially in the fintech, is going to is just at on the verge of just starting its journey, like commerce and payments happen in India. I think in times to come, we are going to see a lot of products in the BFSI space who are solving for especially tier 4, tier 5 cities. People who are going to be first investors, who are going to buy maybe first digital gold, or going to invest first time in mutual funds or stocks. Uh, I think that is going to happen. Uh, we're going to see that in times to come. And I'm very excited about that, because that's going to change the concept of how we really see money and deal with money. Because eventually, if we learn to deal with money, we'll know how to really spend money, right? And the entire ecosystem around all the services and industries will grow and become formalized.
Perfect. Thank you. That's very insightful. Uh, Before we wrap up the session, Gaurav, Harmin, any last piece of advice for designers to build more inclusive products in terms of accessibility, in terms of relevance, and in terms of design for apps?
Uh, I think use first principles. Number one, to start with, go back to basics. It's very important to learn from the youngsters you have around you, whether they're interns and etc. They are their first years or second years. As you grow in your own careers, it's very important to look back what new curriculums in the pedagogy way of teaching, where people are coming from formal educations of design, actually have bring on the table, rather than you telling them what to do. Ask them what they suggest you to do, what new things they bring on the table. It's very important to really upskill the mid-level and the senior folks in times to come. Only one advice I would give the overall to the entire design folks, especially who are early into their careers, is absorb content in a minimum way, but absorb the right content. Just identify and have a mentor very early in your life. Nowadays, it's because we have content on YouTube, and everywhere we have workshops going on. People are not realizing that how important a mentor can be. They can really speed up your career and give you quite good insights when the time come. They know what is going to happen in the future usually, and they can give you really good advice on the go.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. I think there is nothing that beats actually meeting the customers, speaking to them, seeing how they use products and technology, and learning from that. So, see the kind of apps that uh, these people have on their phones versus the apps that some of us have on our phones.
I think that's perfect. Thank you for this very enriching and very insightful conversation. Over to you, Pawan.
Super. I think I have not seen so many questions in one single session at any of the other sessions that have been happening today at the event. And I know we are already past the time, but I'm going to take extra 5 minutes because some of these questions are really important. And I personally am curious about what you folks would answer for this. Let me put this question up on the stage. Where Prashant is asking, should we have same content in different language for different countries, or different content for different countries? Let's maybe also just take that for different audiences. Are we just translating the same idea or story into a different language, or are we creating something entirely new, or maybe just modifying or iterating it a bit?
Can I go on this?
Yeah. Anybody?
So I think very challenging question. I think people are now solved for it, and especially the AI platforms are now solving for it. You can translate the content. If the content is very simple, you can just try translating the content if it still makes sense. But it's very difficult to find the big idea in all the languages, which means the same. But the colloquial translation is very important, right?
Hmm.
If you're taking your
Right.
idea from global to local, you need to understand what are the first of all local literally don'ts you can't do, right?
Yeah.
Understand the other part of it, but colloquial translation is actually the solution for that.
Got it. Okay. Gaurav, anything that you want to add to
Yeah,
it?
so I think it actually it depends on the kind of content that we are looking for here. I think for if it's a long form content, then I think the ideal would be to have custom content for different regions. There are cultural nuances that can be like baked into that content, and it should ideally be modified. But if it's something fairly generic, like certain kinds of names, etc., etc., then that could be actually just translated into the regional languages. So
Got
both
it.
work. It really depends on what kind of content you want to show your users, and what kind of actions do you want to take the user, like you want the users to take based on that content.
Got it. Okay. There's the next question is by Pragya, where she is asking how can designers take different generations into consideration, and how can same design language be used for a brand for online as well as, let's say, offline mediums? Anybody, Gaurav or Harmind, who wants to
Yeah,
go?
no, it's a challenging problem, Pragya. I don't think there is a short or easy answer to this. Products that kind of cater to a large set of users have this problem, and they are still trying to solve these kinds of problems. Having certain kinds of tools available, like having um, letting users change language, letting users speak, uh, letting users do a certain actions that can be remembered in some really easy steps. I think these are things that really help the next billion users. And also, I think the question also had this like different generations,
Yeah,
and I'm like I assume Pragya is referring to the
the
elderly
Gen
who
Zs or elderly,
also
and
have
yeah,
trouble using technology.
yeah.
So some of these techniques and tools also help in that with that set of users as well.
Got it. Okay. I think there's one more question. Maybe this could be like a second part of this question is how do you evaluate the impact of a design across huge and diverse demograph? Like, let's say, if something is being rolled out in certain, let's say, language or format to a set of audience, how are you evaluating the impact of it across these different demographics and, the different, let's say, campaigns that you might be running?
Yeah, so I think with all such kinds of products, it's actually the product usage that shows the impact of some of these changes. So if the product usage increases with certain kinds of changes, then you know that they are working for that set of users. So it's a learning process. We need to like run tests, experiment, and get these solutions out so that users can actually use them, and that usage actually lets us know that uh, it's working or not.
Got it. Okay. I'm gonna probably ask a light-hearted question here, um, which is about how has your personal life sort of influenced your choose of career, and is there any reason particularly why you folks have been into design? Was this by choice, or this is another story of engineers turning into a designer or CA turning into a designer? What was your been like journey been like?
I've been a designer all my life. Long time ago, I studied architecture, and then studied design, and studied some bit of graphic design, interaction design, and then ventured in this domain. So have been a designer all my life.
Harmin, what about you?
I've been born in the family of artists and designers. So my father was an artist. He had a very humble story from painting saris by sitting on the footpath, then coming into building up a textile design business, and learned from him the fine arts, and moved into fine arts and applied arts, and started with basics, got into formal design college, did my communication design, got mentored very early in my life into branding space, then slowly moved into UI UX. Have been designer again all my life, and this is practically I'm doing. And I've been dyslexic during my childhood, so my dyslexic, for which my early teacher told me that you only think you can succeed in life is if you move into either storytelling or you become an artist or you become a sculptor or something like that. So yeah, got mentors in the right way very early, and yeah, so this is practically what I'm doing from the times I know myself.
Wow. I have my last question, and this is something that I wanted to personally ask you folks. A lot of our ideas when we at Pepper are doing some brand campaigns, or let's just say a post idea or anything, a lot of these ideas come from some of our interns. And we have like an army of very extraordinary, these young, talented folks who are just, throwing off ideas. Um, How much do you personally get involved into, let's say, every campaign or every design decision that a massive organization, let's say like a Flipkart and PhonePe, is doing? Are you personally involved in every decision that's happening, or how is the structure for you folks?
Herman, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I work every day towards making myself redundant, by the way. So that's what I do. But I don't micromanage, to be honest. Have been really, really destined to have a very good team. My team is a star team, and people mostly are in my team at a delegation stage. So I have a very simple metrics in my mind, which is support, coach, direct, and delegate. I only focus on the people who requires constant support, so that they can move to the direction stage very early. And you need not to micromanage there. They can take minimal directions and move ahead. And then the people are at the delegation stage where they can be complete owners of their own work, so you need not to micromanage. This helps me filter really my focus areas, people I need to really focus with, and rest everything is totally automated.
Or what about you?
Yeah. So, Pawan, it's hard to get involved in every single decision. I'm definitely involved in some key decisions that go on, and that doesn't mean that I'm I'm the decision maker, or that's the design that I propose goes out, kind of a thing, right? So it's always a team effort. There are like someone said, ideas can come from anywhere. So like you said, a lot of
Yeah,
good ideas come from interns, and similarly in large organizations, ideas can come from anywhere. I think
yeah,
um, the job of both product management and design is to kind of curate these ideas, make sure that we are always looking at some of the top, n number of ideas and
yeah,
constantly
yeah.
working on them and shipping them out, so that our users have a better experience.
Wow, great. Thank you so much, Gaurav and Harmind, for answering all these questions. I think we shoot a little bit over time, but I'm glad that we covered some of these questions that were there in the audience Q&A as well. How can audience reach you? Is LinkedIn the best medium? Twitter, Instagram? Where can they reach you if they have more questions? And I know there are a lot of questions here in the chat.
Any channel works for me, Pawan.
I'm
Okay.
yeah, any whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn, it works.
Okay, folks, if we have not addressed your question, please feel free to ping them on the Twitter DM or LinkedIn. And I think they would be happy to maybe share an answer about that and the questions that you have. But once again, thank you so much, Gaurav and Harman, for doing this today. And thank you so much, Bhavya, for moderating the chat so free flowingly. And thank you so much, everybody who was here in the chat. If you all can see in the chat, there are some gifs that everybody is putting about how did they like this session. They're saying that was very insightful. Some are also saying this was eye-opening. And everybody has liked and is very much inspired by what we spoke today here. So thank you so much once again, Gaurav and Harmind and everybody. We're going to do the next session immediately as we end this with Anand Jha, and I'll see you guys in the next 1 or 2 minutes. Once again, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.